If you've ever been called crazy by your own family, you know the kind of pain that doesn't just sting, it lingers, like a bruise you can't cover up. But what if the very lie meant to destroy you became the key to your freedom? What if the world's cruelest rumor turned out to be the start of your greatest revenge? Before I take you into the most surreal chapter of my life, let me ask you for a small favor. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or had your reputation dragged through the mud by people who should have protected you, please like and subscribe. It helps this channel reach more people who need to know they're not alone. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize you're stronger than you think. Now let's go back to the day my father decided to erase me. It started at a family dinner. The kind where the table is set with silver that's only used for show and the air is thick with secrets. My father sat at the head, his voice booming as he toasted my sister Claire for her latest accomplishment, a new luxury car, bought with money she never earned. I sat quietly, picking at my food, trying to ignore the way everyone's eyes slid past me, as if I were a ghost. Then, out of nowhere, my father cleared his throat. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "Some of you may have heard rumors about my daughter's condition." The room went silent. My mother looked away. Claire smirked. My father continued, "It's been a difficult few years. We've done our best to support her, but mental instability is a serious matter. For her own good, and the good of this family, I've decided to make some changes to my will." I felt the blood drain from my face. I opened my mouth to protest, but he cut me off. "It's for the best, darling. You need help, not responsibility." The next day, the story was in the local paper. "Prominent businessman's daughter suffers breakdown." My father's words, quoted for all to see. "We're doing everything we can for her. She's not fit to manage the estate." I stopped going to family events. Friends stopped calling. Even people at work looked at me differently. My world shrank to the size of my apartment, and every time I tried to reach out, I was met with pity or suspicion. Claire, meanwhile, flourished. She moved into the guest house, threw lavish parties, and posted photos of her perfect life online. My father gave her everything: cars, jewelry, even the family dog. I was erased, a footnote in my own story. I tried to fight back. I went to therapy, got a clean bill of health, even hired a lawyer. But every door was slammed in my face. "Your father says you're unstable," they'd say. "We can't get involved." So I left. I packed my bags, changed my number, and moved to a city where no one knew my name. I started over, building a life from scratch. I worked hard, made new friends, and slowly, the pain faded. I learned to live without my family, without the weight of their judgment. Years passed. I heard rumors. My father's health was failing. Claire was spending money faster than he could make it. The estate was in trouble. But I stayed away. I refused to let them pull me back into their web. Then, one morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my father's lawyer, Mr. Hargrove. "Your father has passed," he said, his voice formal. "The reading of the will is tomorrow. You're required to attend." I almost didn't go. But something in his voice made me curious. So I put on my best dress, walked into the old family home, and braced myself for whatever humiliation awaited. The room was full. Relatives, old friends, even a few reporters. Claire sat at the front, dressed in black, her eyes red from crying, or maybe from lack of sleep. My mother barely looked at me. Mr. Hargrove began to read. As expected, the house, the cars, the jewelry, all went to Claire. My name wasn't mentioned once. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, but I kept my head high. Then, just as everyone started to stand, Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat. "There is one final clause, a secret trust established by your father many years ago. the sole trustee and beneficiary, is his daughter, my name. The room froze. Claire's mouth fell open. My mother gasped. Mr. Hargrove continued. This trust contains the majority of your father's assets. All financial decisions, allowances, and distributions must be approved by the trustee, effective immediately. Claire jumped to her feet. That's impossible. She's not fit, Dad said. Mr. Hargrove held up a hand. Your father's wishes are clear. Unless the trustee is proven legally incompetent, she alone controls the estate. I sat in stunned silence as the reality sank in. My father had spent years destroying my reputation, only to leave me with the ultimate power. Claire, who had mocked me, now needed my permission for everything, even groceries. As the room erupted in chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. The room was a storm of voices, shocked relatives, angry whispers, Claire's shrill protest echoing off the marble walls. I sat perfectly still, letting the chaos swirl around me. For so long, I'd been the one left out. The one talked over, the one whose voice never mattered. Now every eye in the room was on me, waiting to see what I would do. Claire stormed up to Mr. Hargrove, her face flushed with fury. This is a mistake. My father would never trust her with anything. She's unstable, he said so himself. Mr. Hargrove didn't flinch. Your father's instructions were explicit. The trust is airtight. Unless your sister is declared legally incompetent by a court, she is the sole trustee. That means she decides what happens to the estate, including your allowance. Claire turned to me, her eyes blazing. You can't do this. You don't know how to manage any of this. You'll ruin everything. I met her gaze, calm and steady. Funny, that's exactly what Dad said about me. But here we are. She sputtered, searching for words, but I stood up, smoothing my dress. If you'd like to discuss your allowance, you can make an appointment with my office. Otherwise, I have nothing more to say. The lawyer handed me a thick folder. Documents, account numbers, keys to safety deposit boxes. My hands shook as I took them, but I kept my face composed. I could feel the weight of the entire estate settling onto my shoulders. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like justice. As I left the room, I heard my mother's voice, small and uncertain. Please, can we talk? I paused, turning to look at her. For a moment, I saw the woman who used to tuck me in at night, who used to braid my hair and tell me stories. But that woman had vanished long ago, replaced by someone who stood by while my father tore me down. I need time, I said quietly. A lot has happened. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. I should have done more. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the air was crisp and cold. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my lungs, letting it wash away years of pain. I walked to my car, the folder clutched to my chest, and sat behind the wheel for a long time, just breathing. That night, I went through the documents. The trust was massive. Properties, investments, accounts I'd never even heard of. My father had hidden the bulk of his wealth away, protected from taxes, creditors, even from Claire, and now it was all mine to manage. I spent the next few days meeting with bankers, accountants, and lawyers. I learned more about trusts and estates than I ever thought possible. I hired a financial advisor, someone with no ties to my family, and set up strict protocols for every transaction. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. Claire called every day, sometimes begging, sometimes threatening. She left voicemails that swung from tearful apologies to furious accusations. You're ruining my life! Dad wanted me to have everything. You don't deserve any of this! I didn't respond. I let the silence speak for itself. One afternoon, she showed up at my office unannounced. She looked different, her hair unstyled, her makeup smudged, her confidence cracked. She sat across from me, her hands twisting in her lap. I need money, she said, her voice small. Just for groceries. I can't even buy food. I studied her, remembering all the times she'd laughed at me, all the times she'd joined in when Dad called me crazy. I thought about the years I'd spent scraping by while she lived in luxury. "I'll approve a basic allowance," I said finally. "Enough for essentials. But you'll need to submit receipts. No more shopping sprees, no more parties." She glared at me, but I didn't back down. "If you want more, you'll need to get a job. The trust isn't your personal piggy bank anymore." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sat back, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I hadn't wanted revenge. I'd just wanted a chance to prove myself, to be seen for who I really was. As the weeks passed, the calls slowed. My mother wrote me a letter, apologizing for everything, asking for forgiveness. I read it, but I wasn't ready to answer. Healing takes time, and I was still learning how to trust myself, let alone anyone else. I started volunteering at a mental health clinic, using my inheritance to fund scholarships for students who'd been labeled unstable or difficult. I wanted to help others find their voice, to show them that their worth wasn't defined by anyone else's opinion. And slowly I began to rebuild my life, not as the crazy daughter, but as the woman who survived, who thrived, who turned her father's lie into her own liberation. Months passed and the world moved on, but the echoes of my father's betrayal lingered in the quiet moments. Sometimes I'd catch myself replaying his words, wondering if there was ever a version of him that truly loved me, or if I'd always just been a pawn in his games. But every time doubt crept in, I'd remind myself of the truth. I was here, standing on my own, not because of him, but in spite of him. Claire's life changed overnight. The friends who used to flock to her parties stopped, calling when the money dried up. She tried to sell jewelry and designer bags, but the trust's terms were ironclad. Nothing could be liquidated without my signature. She sent emails, sometimes polite, sometimes desperate, always ending with the same plea. "Please, just help me. I can't live like this." I kept my promise. She got her basic allowance, enough for food and rent, but nothing more. I watched as she learned, slowly and painfully, what it meant to live without endless safety nets. I hoped in some small way it would make her stronger, more compassionate. Maybe one day we could find our way back to each other. But for now, boundaries were the only thing keeping me sane. My mother reached out more often, her letters growing longer, more honest. She wrote about her regrets, about the ways she'd let fear and pride keep her silent. She asked if we could meet just once to talk. I agreed, but only in a public place, a quiet cafe, neutral ground. When I saw her, she looked older, smaller, but her eyes were clear. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She apologized again, not just for what she'd done, but for what she hadn't done. Standing up for me, believing in me, loving me the way a mother should. I listened, letting her words wash over me. Not sure if I was ready to forgive, but willing to try. After that meeting, something shifted inside me. I realized that holding on to anger was just another way of letting my father control my life. I didn't want to be defined by his lies anymore. I wanted to be free, so I focused on the future. I expanded my work at the mental health clinic, started a foundation in my name, and began speaking at schools and conferences about resilience, about surviving family betrayal, about finding your own worth when the world tries to take it from you. People reached out from all over, strangers who'd been called crazy, who'd been cut out of wills, who'd been told they'd never amount to anything. I answered every message, every letter, every call, determined to be the voice I'd needed when I was alone. One day, as I was leaving the clinic, I saw Claire waiting outside. She looked nervous but determined. "I got a job," she said almost defiantly. "It's not much, but it's mine." I smiled, genuine pride blooming in my chest. "That's good, Claire. I'm happy for you." She hesitated, then hugged me, awkward but real. "I'm sorry for everything. I was awful to you. I didn't know how to be anything else." I hugged her back, letting go of years of pain, just a little. We're both learning. As we parted, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we could build something new, not as rivals, but as sisters. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking at the city lights, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. My father's voice was quieter now, drowned out by the sound of my own. I was no longer the unstable daughter, no longer the family scapegoat. I was the trustee, the survivor, the woman who turned a legacy of cruelty into a future of hope. If you're listening to this and you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or betrayed by the people who should have loved you most, I want you to know you are not alone. You are not broken. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living well, on your own terms, in your own power, with your own voice.